Hello from the Channel studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the programme that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. On the programme this week, UK and EU strike post-Brexit Northern Ireland Protocol deal, plus at least 63 migrants dead after shipwreck in Italy. We begin with the new Brexit deal reached this week. The agreement was announced by the UK Prime Minister and European Commission President concerning trade arrangements in Northern Ireland. The Windsor Framework will effectively replace the Northern Ireland Protocol, which led to major disagreements between the UK and EU. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's revised agreement was warmly welcomed by many in his own political party, including Theresa May, the former Prime Minister. The UK and the EU struck a deal on Monday to potentially end one of the biggest remaining disputes after Brexit. The friction stemmed from rules over trade for Northern Ireland, a difficult and controversial aspect of the UK split from Europe, both for the EU and Northern Ireland's lawmakers. But on Monday, UK leader Rishi Sunak held a new chapter in relations with Brussels, calling the deal a decisive breakthrough.
I'm pleased to report that we have now made a decisive breakthrough. Together, we have changed the original protocol and are today announcing the new Windsor Framework. Today's agreement delivers smooth-flowing trade within the whole United Kingdom, protects Northern Ireland's place in our union, and safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. The United Kingdom and European Union may have had our differences in the past, but we are allies, trading partners and friends, something that we've seen clearly in the past year as we joined with others to support Ukraine. This is the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. For a quarter of a century, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement has endured because, at its heart, is respect for the aspirations and identity of all communities. Today's agreement is about preserving that delicate balance and charting a new way forward for the people of Northern Ireland.
On her part, the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, said the so-called Windsor Framework provided a long-lasting solution.
We can take pride in the fact that we have delivered on that commitment. Because today we have reached an agreement in principle on the Windsor Framework. The Windsor Framework lays down new arrangements on Ireland, Northern Ireland. This new framework will allow us to begin a new chapter. It provides for long-lasting solutions that both of us are confident will work for all people and businesses in Northern Ireland. For this to work, we have agreed on strong safeguards, like IT access, labels and enforcement procedures, that will protect the integrity of the European Union's single market. The new Windsor Framework respects and protects our respective markets and our respective legitimate interests. And most importantly, it protects the very hard-earned peace gains of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement for the people of Northern Ireland and across the island of Ireland. Violence has no place in our society. I condemn wholeheartedly the shooting of the PSNI officer in Northern Ireland last week, and my thoughts are with the officer and his family and friends. This year will mark the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, an important milestone of the historic peace process. The new Windsor Framework is here to benefit people in Northern Ireland and support all communities celebrating peace on the island of Ireland. And this is why I believe we can now open a new chapter in our partnership.
The Irish Nationalist Party also welcomed news of the deal.
Firstly, let me say that I welcome the fact that a deal has been done. I think that most people in society out there will welcome the fact that we're at the end of this negotiation. That's it, complete. And I think that most people's minds here at home will very much quickly turn to the fact that we need to be in this institution, we need to be working together, we need to be tackling things like the health service, creating jobs, growing our economy, taking the full advantage that the protocol affords us. I think that as I speak to you right now, the details are still coming hot off the press. We're working our way through all of that detail, and we'll probably have more to say about that because we're going to meet this evening, continue to meet this evening just as a party in terms of analysing all of that detail. But I welcome the fact that a deal has been done. We've always said that it was possible to have a deal. We've always said that with pragmatism, solutions could be found. So the fact that both sides have arrived at that point today, and this represents the end of the negotiation, I think is something that will be well received. I've always been very clear that we needed to maintain the protections that were inbuilt to the protocol. From what has been said this afternoon, that appears to be the case, and that's very, very important. But I do hope that there are solutions found, and there appears to be solutions found, and some pragmatism around some of the issues, and that's a welcome thing. What I've said consistently throughout the whole of the Brexit debate is that the people here have been left in limbo, they've left with uncertainty. I'm hoping that today, because we're at the end of the negotiation, the deal is now done, I'm hoping that today all energy and efforts focus at home here to making politics work and actually getting around the executive table.
The deal still needs to be approved by the UK Parliament, but Britain's main opposition, Labour Party, and a number of politicians have thrown their support behind the agreement.
Because in this 25th anniversary year of the Good Friday Agreement, we must once again embrace compromise and put division behind us. This deal is not perfect, but because we recognise that the UK agreed to the protocol and has an obligation to make it work, because we recognise that for the protocol to work there will inevitably be trade-offs, and because we always recognise that peace and prosperity in Northern Ireland is hard won, Labour will support the Windsor framework.
Can I congratulate my right honourable friend and the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and the Foreign Secretary and all their teams for all the work they have done to achieve this negotiated settlement, which will make a huge difference. And does my right honourable friend agree with me that the best move now is for everybody across this House to support this settlement, because that is what is in the best interests of all the people of Northern Ireland?
Prime Minister.
However, the success of the agreement likely hinges on the approval of the Democratic Unionist Party and Eurosceptics within Prime Minister Sunak's own party. The DUP is currently boycotting Northern Ireland's power-sharing agreements, which was central to the 1998 peace deal known as the Good Friday Agreement.
In broad terms, it is clear that significant progress has been secured across a number of areas, whilst also recognising that there remain key issues of concern. There can be no disguising the fact, for example, that in some sectors of our economy in Northern Ireland, EU law remains applicable in our part of the United Kingdom. My party will want to study the detail of what has been published today, as well as examining the legal text, the political declaration, and the government's command paper. Where necessary, we stand ready to engage with the government in order to seek further clarification, reworking or change as required. Ultimately, my party will now assess all these proposed outcomes and arrangements against our 7 tests outlined in our 2022 Assembly Election Manifesto. And I want an assurance from the Prime Minister that not just now but in the future, the Government of the United Kingdom will protect Northern Ireland's place within that internal market and will not allow the application of EU law to put barriers in the way of our ability to trade with the rest of our own country.
Could I remind the Prime Minister that although he talks about 1,700 pages of EU law being removed from Northern Ireland, hundreds of thousands of pages will still remain. Border posts are still being planned to be built, and the Prime Minister has admitted that future EU laws will apply to Northern Ireland unless under paragraph 52, his government decides not to proceed with law changes for the United Kingdom as a whole, or he vetoes EU proposals in the Joint Committee. Can he understand why we don't have confidence in that, and why we still fear that our position within the United Kingdom is not going to be restored by this agreement?
On Tuesday, Mr. Sunak was in Belfast as part of efforts to sell his Brexit deal, detailing to businesses and politicians how he believes it will ease the flow of trade between Britain, Northern Ireland and Ireland.
And I'm really pleased. In fact, I'm over the moon that yesterday we managed to have a decisive breakthrough with our negotiations with the EU, reached agreement, the new Windsor framework, that I think is an extraordinary positive step for Northern Ireland, and it represents, as the European Union President herself said, a historic moment for us to move forward and resolve some of the difficulties of the past. That is the prize that is on offer. Because if we get this right, if we get this framework implemented, if we get the executive back up and running here, Northern Ireland is in the unbelievably special position, unique position in the entire world, European continent, in having privileged access, not just to the UK home market, which is enormous, 5th biggest in the world, but also the European Union single market.
Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden, who often speaks with pride of his Irish roots, has welcomed the deal, calling it an essential step to ensuring peace is preserved.
I mean, we're grateful that the two sides were able to come up with this Windsor framework, as they call it, this agreement in keeping with the Northern Ireland protocols. We believe that this will help improve the prosperity of both the EU and the UK, and will open up all kinds of now avenues for trade that were somewhat at risk. So we'll leave things where they are right now.
US officials had previously warned that any action which endangered the peace agreement could harm the prospect of a US-UK trade deal. At least 63 migrants attempting to cross the Mediterranean into Europe were killed this week after their boat was wrecked off a seaside resort area in southern Italy. The disaster has reignited debates over Italy's strict migration laws. The country is one of the main landing points for people trying to enter Europe by sea, and the so-called Central Mediterranean route is known as one of the world's most dangerous. Rescuers trolling the Mediterranean recovered more bodies on Monday, a day after a wooden sailboat carrying migrants to Europe shipwrecked off of Italy's southern coast. Debris lined the beach after the vessel crashed into rocks in stormy weather on Sunday, leaving scores dead, including more than a dozen children. The boat had set sail from the port of Izmir in western Turkey towards the end of last week. Rescuers said most of the migrants came from Afghanistan, with the others from countries including Pakistan, Iran, Somalia and Syria. Local authorities said 80 people survived the shipwreck, but as many as 200 people may have been aboard the vessel when it left from Turkey, suggesting many more passengers are missing. Locals left flowers and candles on metal railings outside a sports hall, where dozens of coffins were laid out ahead of a funeral for the victims.
È l'ora del silenzio.
It is the hour of silence, of prayer, of recollection, of deep meditation, but it is the hour in which we must also question ourselves responsibly about this new tragedy, with respect to which we risk all becoming accomplices.
Rischiamo di diventare tutti complici.
The shipwreck has reignited a debate on migration in Europe and Italy, where the recently elected right-wing government's tough new laws for migrant rescue charities have drawn criticism from the United Nations and others. Hundreds of thousands of migrants have reached Italy by boat over the past decade, fleeing conflict and poverty back home. The United Nations Missing Migrants Project has registered more than 20,000 deaths and disappearances in the Mediterranean since 2014, including more than 220 just this year, making it the most dangerous migrant route in the world. When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, we head over to South Africa for the Songa Culture Group Festival. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on the program. A week after the US president visited Kyiv to reaffirm enduring support against the Russian invasion, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen visited the Ukrainian capital on Monday to emphasize the United States' commitment to Ukraine. The trip, during which Yellen announced $1.25 billion in economic aid to Ukraine, is part of a diplomatic push by the Biden administration to show support for Ukraine while maintaining pressure on Russia as the war enters a second year. Other allies have also announced additional support for Ukraine and more sanctions on Russia.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen swept into Kyiv on Monday in a surprise visit to reaffirm U.S. support for Ukraine as it fights Russia's invasion, highlighting U.S. economic aid that is bolstering Ukraine's war effort.
As we mark 1 year since the beginning of this full-scale invasion, the message I bring you from President Biden is simple. America will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. And today I'm proud to announce the transfer of an additional amount of over $1.2 billion.
Yellen's visit came a week after U.S. President Joe Biden staged his own unannounced trip to Kyiv and promised $500 million in additional military aid for Ukraine and new sanctions on Russia announced days later.
Mr. President, how are you? Very good to see you.
Also visiting Kyiv this week was the International Criminal Court's top prosecutor, who was in the country to investigate Russia's campaign of missile and drone attacks on power and other infrastructure. Russia says the attacks, which have killed hundreds of civilians and left millions with no electricity or water, are legitimate strikes aimed at weakening the enemy's military. But Ukraine cast them as a means of intimidating ordinary people.
I know that there are a lot of different war crimes, and of course we want justice and bring all these guilty people to all of them. But I think that the priority for our people, it's about our future generation.
There seems to be a lot of damage in Ukraine, and it may well be that it's part of a policy or part of a plan, and we need to get to the bottom of it and see whether or not there's criminal responsibility. And if there is, we have an international criminal court that has jurisdiction to look into it.
A year on since the war began, and thousands of soldiers and civilians have died, while millions of Ukrainians have been displaced. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg this week reiterated Ukraine would one day become a member of the alliance, but said it was a long-term perspective.
So both NATO allies have agreed that Ukraine will become a member of our alliance, but at the same time that is a long-term perspective. What is the issue now is to ensure that Ukraine prevail as a sovereign independent nation, and that therefore we need to support Ukraine.
Kyiv requested fast-track NATO membership last September, 7 months after Russia invaded Ukraine. NATO says it has an open-door policy to Ukraine, but has not said whether it will accelerate moves towards Kyiv's possible accession.
Over in Yemen, the country is one of the world's biggest humanitarian disasters, despite a no-war, no-peace stalemate that has largely stopped fighting. Yemen's conflict, which began in 2014, has killed tens of thousands of people and has left about 2/3 of the population in need of humanitarian and protection services. This week, the United Nations raised $1.2 billion for humanitarian aid to Yemen, but the amount is far below a target of $4.3 billion set by the UN.
Underfunding has seen agencies scale back Yemen aid projects, including food rations, in the past couple of years. According to the United Nations, last year, donors gave $2.2 billion of the $4.27 billion sought. United Nations data shows this year, $1.2 billion was raised.
I'm glad to say that we've had 31 pledges announced today, and these pledges come to just about $1.2 billion. Thank you very much indeed to those who have pledged. I should add that last year, I think we, in a similar occasion, reached about the same amount against about the same budget, and strikingly and helpfully then throughout the time after the pledging event, another $1 billion was raised.
The United States, Yemen's top donor, pledged more than $444 million for this year's humanitarian response, bringing its total contribution since the start of Yemen's war to $5.4 billion. Globally, the United Nations has said it needs a record $51.5 billion for aid this year. Yemen's 8-year conflict pits a Saudi Arabian-led military coalition against the Iran-aligned Houthi group, which ousts Yemen's internationally recognized government from the capital, Sana'a, in late 2014. The war has killed tens of thousands of people, devastated infrastructure and the economy, and left 2/3 of the population, more than 21 million people, needing assistance.
After years of death, displacement, destruction, starvation and suffering, the truce delivered real dividends for people. Civilian flights resumed from Sana'a. Vital supplies arrived through the port of Udaydah. But the truce lapsed off after only 6 months. Yes, key provisions have remained in place, but the economy is in enormous difficulties, basic services risk to collapse, and humanitarian needs continue to soar while access is constrained and funding perennially falls short.
A UN-brokered truce initially agreed last April has delivered the longest stretch of relative calm and has largely held despite expiring in October without agreement between the warring sides to extend it. Saudi Arabia and the Houthis are engaging in direct talks facilitated by Oman in parallel to United Nations efforts to establish a formal ceasefire and launch inclusive political negotiations.
And finally, on the program, on a lighter note, we head over to South Africa, which is often called the Rainbow Nation because of the collage of races and ethnic groups that make up the nation. One of the ethnic groups that make up that big, colorful picture is the Tsonga or Shangaan. They are known for their energetic dance and huge, colorful costumes called the Shibalane. We joined a Tsonga group for a cultural festival in Soweto, South Africa, as they showed off the fabric they're made of. Let's take a look.
At a time when several vital elements of the culture of African communities are being shed for what's considered modern and cool, who can forget the ever-energetic and colorful Shomajozi? Shomajozi is South African from the Tsonga ethnic grouping in the Limpopo province of the country. But Tsonga, or the Shangaans as they're called, say they're proud of the colors they bring to the Rainbow Nation.
As Batsonga speaking people, we believe in social cohesion. We believe in promoting socialism. We believe in gathering. And that is us. And as we are doing this, we are promoting our culture.
We joined the Tsonga community as they officially began the year 2023 in Meadowlands, Soweto, with a dance event, Batsonga style. From the men's makwaya to the shibelane, and there's also the shijai-jai.
We call it Zambane, it's Tsonga. This is Mcheka. This one is Buhlalu. The queen. Oh, the queen. They call it the queen. This is Belani. Yeah, this is this one. Yeah. Okay, this one they call it Shipanza.
When it's time to do the Shibelani dance, the show called Mcheka goes off and the other elements go to work. Standing out from that group of women is a man who is not shy to do his thing. Nsako Makobele is a teaching graduate of the Tshwane University of Technology. He gets the double take all the time, but he's proud of what he does.
To me, it was very simple because I grew up with, mostly I grew up with ladies, and then they were dancing Shibelani. So I used to dance with them while I was still young. So it was a habit while I was growing up till now. Yes, that's the reason you see me in the group.
On the sidelines, it's normal to see great steppers as well, big and small, and they're all drawn by the music.
The group has been long existing, and it's about time that we be celebrating our 40 years in this dance in Soweto, in Gauteng in particular.
Tsonga people can also be found in Mozambique and Zimbabwe, where the language may have adopted different elements, but the colorful Shibelani is still the fabric that pulls them all together. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia for Foreign Dispatches.
And that's the programme today, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. Bye for now.